Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel. If you are brand new here, welcome. I'm Bonnie, Old Soul Mermaid. Well, I knew when I did the first deck declutter video that I was going to probably have another one. And here it is. Deck decluttering, spring cleaning, deck rehoming, whatever you want to call it. Here is the second video. Now, again, disclaimer, basically I want to rehome these decks because they have served their time in my practice, in my home. I've outgrown them maybe a little bit. I've changed, I've evolved. It's by no means a reflection on the decks themselves. They're beautiful artwork. You know, I love them all at one time pretty much, except for maybe a couple of these, but we'll get to that when I get to the deck. All right, so without further ado, here we go. The next deck to be moving on is the Vivid Journey Tarot by Jessica Allaire. I got this deck very, very early on in my tarot journey. In fact, I have been going to half price books for years, pretty much ever since I moved to Texas. And it was, you know, well before I discovered tarot, you know, that I was going to half price books. But then when I discovered half price books had tarot cabinets and a metaphysical section, you know, I visit there quite a bit to look for books and other things that they sell. But I found this deck for $7.99, and it's a great little beginner deck. It's a Llewellyn deck. It's got a great little guidebook for a beginner, which I was at the time when I found this deck. This is a great beginner deck. It's on that older Llewellyn cardstock, you know, it's a little papery, but it's still good. It shuffles really well. And as you can see, if you're a beginner, this is a great deck. If you're starting out with the RWS and maybe you don't jive with the RWS imagery, this is a great deck that I would recommend to beginners starting out on their RWS journey. I say I got this when I was a beginner. You know, I still feel like a beginner. I still very much am a beginner, but I have made some strides. And I just, you know, I have other decks that I like in this niche. I predominantly read with the RWS. I have toyed with Marseille a little bit. I haven't ventured into Thoth yet, but that's something I could see in my future. But I have lots of RWS decks because that's what I read, and I find that this one just hasn't been getting the love that I think it should. It is a great little deck. I would say it's a great deck for a young person, you know, maybe a preteen or something, but there is a little bit of nudity, though it's not graphic. So, you know, if you're a parent, just be aware of that. But you know, there are images in here. The illustrations are definitely something that would appeal to a younger person and the young at heart, I might add. So this is the Vivid Journey Tarot by Jessica Allaire, and off to my local half-price books it goes. The next deck to be leaving my collection is the Literary Witches Oracle. I love this deck, and the only reason that this particular copy is leaving is because it is brand new. And I have 2 copies of this deck. I love this deck so much that I bought 2 of them while they were still relatively cheap on Amazon, and I think it is a fairly inexpensive deck. But I love this deck, but the cardstock is a sturdy linen cardstock, and I feel like I don't need 2 copies. And in fact, I already have someone that I know that I'm going to give this to that would love this deck. So I'm going to give that person my new copy, and I still vibe with this deck. I love it, I love it, I love it, but I don't feel like I need 2 copies of it. And of course, it being a mass market deck, I think I can let this one go. The next deck to be moving on is the Magical Mermaids and Dolphins Oracle deck by Doreen Virtue. Again, I found this deck at Half Price Books, and it was very economical, and again, very early in my tarot practice. I think it was one of the first oracle decks that I found there and that I just purchased for my collection when I didn't have very many at all. And if you're noticing a theme, yes, a lot of these decks I've had for a while, and it's just that I've outgrown them, or my practice has changed, or how I read has changed a little bit. I've become more picky, especially with my oracle decks, and I have many fewer oracle decks than I do tarot decks. But this one, you know, I'm an ocean-loving water girl as a Pisces woman, but I have other mermaid and water decks. And some of these, like this one, they make reference to heaven and God, and that doesn't sit well with my brain right now. And if you've been on my channel long enough, you know I'm a recovering Mormon, and I'm trying to expunge that dogma. And I have I have negative feelings towards organized religions in general right now, and I'm fighting with them. I'm trying to work with them, and I can't stand the Christian stuff right now. I really can't. So anything, well, we all know which way Doreen Virtue has gone, but there's always been kind of those elements in her decks, and anything that has to do with God or heaven or any kind of that kind of speak, I have to move it out. I really have to move it out. Though, see, let go of old guilt and remember that you're God's perfect child. I love this image though. I love the mermaids. The artwork is different. You can tell it looks like it's been done by different artists. I don't know, or a different technique. I don't know how Doreen Virtue worked or cultivated her art. But one thing, I wish the images were bigger. You know, there's huge borders, but all in all, I liked working with it, but when I was working with it, I took a lot of those kind of cards out, and now I really don't reach for it anymore. I have other water decks that I enjoy a bit more, but the images are beautiful. I mean, I love mermaids. I love any depiction of mermaids in water and sea life. I have no problem with the images, and some of the messages are nice. The artwork is nice and calming. The colors are soothing. So in a lot of ways, it's a great little deck, but not for me where I am right now. The next deck that I'm very sure that's going to be moving on is the Amenti Oracle, the Featherheart deck and guidebook, Ancient Wisdom for the Modern World. This is a beautiful deck, very clean and has a minimalistic aesthetic. You see it's a beautiful magnetic closure box, and the cards are housed in a separate box. And it does come with a very nice guidebook. I really, really like the backs on these, and I do quite like the nice matte cardstock. But, and this is again an early acquisition. I think I remember picking this up with some money that was left over on a Barnes & Noble gift card. So I thought it looked appealing and I picked it up, and I did use it for a bit. But the problem I have, I love the illustration, are kind of the headings or keywords. I am peaceful. I mean, I never quite figured out how to read with that. You know, when I would get the I am peaceful, it's like, yeah, okay. For my daily pulls, I respect the properties of others. And it's just something, you know, I just didn't completely bond with this deck. I give offerings that are genuine. I live in truth. You know, I think a lot of it is, I don't know how to phrase it, quite obvious. I love the imagery, I love the energy of it, but it was just something I really didn't bond with. I did try working with it, but I think somebody else could appreciate it more than I did, and I think it would suit somebody else's practice quite a bit. You know, it's in excellent condition. It didn't get quite as much love as it should have. I mean, it is a fantastic deck. It really is beautiful. I love the artwork in this deck. I love how clean it is. But I really couldn't find my way around some of these keywords or phrases. And I think it needs to move on. It's definitely moving on. Next up, we have a Los Scarabeo deck. It's the Tarot of the Secret Forest. What I found intriguing about this deck is that the deck doesn't have a traditional back. It has two sides. And one thing that was fun to do with this deck was to put it in a bag and just pull, you know, shuffle it and pull out the cards inside the bag, you know, mix it all up in a large bag. And what I would do is use the black and white side as my reversal. When I was kind of trying to learn reversals, I still find that I don't really like to read with reversals. For me right now, I think I get all that I need from a standard, you know, just upright positions with the cards next to each other, you know, and their relationship. Is how I still like to read, you know, and their positions in a spread determines, you know, the meaning of a certain card, their relationship together. But I did play with this. I made a large tarot bag and, you know, I shuffled them and then mixed them up in whatever I pulled out. And the dark side would be my reversal. But why I'm getting rid of this deck is because I never quite bonded with the imagery. It is quite small, as you can see with the muted colors. These cards are, I would say, you know, Los Scarabeo, they're kind of long and skinny. And I find that my eyes, with all the detail and all the muted colors, especially on the color side, made it a little hard for me just to pick out any symbolism, to pick out, you know, meaning for me. There was something about it that just kept me from bonding with this deck. And I found that if I wanted some Fae energy, I much prefer my Paulina Cassidy decks. Because of the colors, I prefer the color palettes. And those are quite intricate as well. But for some reason, I can read with those decks much easier than I can with this one. This one, yeah, it was hard for me. And so I never really quite bonded with it, even though I think some of the images are just beautiful and the artwork is stunning. But, you know, I don't know. We never know what we're going to bond with, what's going to, I don't know, sit with us, what we're going to be able to read. This one was hard for me to read. It was kind of a cold deck, if that makes sense. I really had to work to read with this deck. I love this card right here. The Ten of Wands. This is a fantastic card, I think. And so is the Six of Cups. So, but I think somebody else can bond with this deck. And yeah, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful, but it's probably meant for somebody else and not meant for me. The next deck is another Los Scarabeo deck, and it is the Fairy Lights Tarot. This deck I did like better than the Tarot of the Secret Forest. I found it easier to read with, and these backs are gorgeous. So gorgeous. And as the title suggests, Fairy Lights Tarot, I found because the imagery was a little bit lighter, though you still get some of that muted color palette, I did have an easier time reading with this deck. I did very much prefer it over the other. But because, again, I really, really like my Paulina Cassidy decks, this deck still, you know, was not getting enough love. And I have all of Paulina Cassidy's, you know, Fae type decks. And so this one, you know, I'm not using. So I think it's time to let it go. Though, again, I did have an easier time. I do love this card, Seven of Wands. It's the illustration on the box. But if I'm not reaching for it, you know, I think somebody else might appreciate it. And so off it goes. All right. The next one to be rehomed is this copy of the Osho Zen Tarot that I picked up at Half Price Books. Again, probably with the leftover money on a gift card. Most of you who are watching this video will be very familiar with this deck, so I'm not going to dwell too much on it, except to say that I was heavily influenced very early on in my tarot journey to get this deck by a couple of YouTubers that are pretty big on YouTube. And so when I was, you know, I didn't have very many decks at all, I purchased this deck because I know that these two YouTubers spoke very highly of using this deck a lot at the beginning of their journeys, bonding with it, and I thought that it would be a deck for me, and very quickly found that it was not. I got nothing from this deck, even though I do like the imagery in it, and very quickly found that this is not a deck for me, though I kept it in my collection. I've kept it these years later because I thought that, you know, I need to work with it. I need to work with it. I should really give it a deep dive and a chance, but I'm just not called to work with it. And so I think for that reason, it needs to go. And somebody else can enjoy it, and somebody else can love it, and it needs to find a new home. Okay, next we have the Mystical Shaman Oracle Deck and Guidebook. This is a beautiful, beautiful set by Hay House. Again, you can see how beautifully packaged this deck is. It is a stunning deck, but you know what? It's another deck that I got early on. See if I can get this deck out. Because it came highly recommended by some YouTubers, and this was at a time when I was still trying to find my tastes and what I liked, and I was experimenting kind of with everything. These backs are gorgeous. I like the matte cardstock. I love this cardstock. So yeah, I was still trying to find myself, what resonated with me, and I do resonate with this artwork, but the deck, I did not have, you know, a very deep bonding experience. And in fact, trying to read with this deck, it was more of a forced experience. And working with this deck, I was feeling, it brought feelings of what's wrong with me? Why does everybody love this deck and I don't? And it brought me back to how I felt when I was growing up Mormon, and I was wondering, why don't I feel the same way as these people profess that they do? And they get up in church and they say their testimony about the truthfulness of the Gospels and the teachings of Jesus and of Joseph Smith, and I would always think, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why don't I feel this way? Why don't I have the fervor that they do? And this deck kind of brought those feelings back, because I didn't feel the way that a lot of YouTubers were professing that they felt. And, you know, this is before I realized the decks were being gifted. And on YouTube unboxings, you know, you can get a deck, unbox it, and totally be attracted to the imagery and the deck itself. You know, I've done that with my unboxings, but then later on you find out that using it is another story. You know, using the deck, as much as you love the imagery or the premise, it's not working for you. So yeah, it was one of those experiences, but I know somebody else will find it in my local half-price books, or you know what, I think I may offer it to somebody that I know and that work with this type of energy, and they may appreciate it. So I may offer it to that person first before I take it to half-price books. So yes, it's gorgeous. Oh my gosh, it is so gorgeous. I love touching the cardstock, but yeah, not for me, and that's okay. The next deck that we'll be moving on is a Yogic Path Oracle deck by Sahara Rose with illustrations by Danielle Noel. This is a beautiful, stunning deck, just like the Mystical Shaman, with its big, huge guidebook. It's gorgeous. The gold foil, the separate box, the ribbon, gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. When I bought this, I was definitely on a Danielle Noel deck artwork kick, and I had all of her decks, all of her illustrated decks, and her decks that she did with Rebecca Campbell, and those decks have since left my collection. Look at this. Beautiful, right? Gorgeous. I used this deck, but I found that it didn't really suit my practice. I do yoga casually. I'm not really deep into the Indian culture right now in time. There's some other things that I'm working to study, and I just, you know, I would have to look up the words for everything when using this deck, and I found that I wasn't, you know, I would pick a card or do a little spread that was in the book and try to make heads and tails of it, and I found that I couldn't. You know, I tried using this deck only and using a spread and see what all these terms would mean in a reading, and it just didn't work for me. I really, really, really wanted to love this deck. I think I do love the artwork. I love the production value. I just, you know, it didn't work for me, and that's okay. I bought this deck. I think I pre-ordered it and got it right away when it was coming out. And maybe I should have done a little bit more research. I definitely should have, you know, waited. But, you know, at this time, you know, when I was looking at or deciding to pre-order this deck, again, I was just still trying to find what I liked, what would resonate, and it was an experiment, and I've learned a lesson from it. So on to someone else's shelf, tarot practice, home it goes, and that's okay. Now, this isn't a deck per se, but it is a companion journal to the Yogic Path Oracle. And I got this, you know, months after getting the deck. I think it was released sometime after the deck was. And I got it because I thought it would spur me on to wanting to use the deck, and that it would make me want to, and it would get me a little bit more excited to use the deck if I was using a journal in conjunction with it. But sadly, it did not. It is beautiful, you know, spiral bound and lots of great information. But then I got to this, the menstrual cycles. And this was a time that I got this, that my OBGYN was suggesting that, or actually telling me that it was time to get off of birth control. And, you know, the change of life was happening without getting more graphic. And my cycles had stopped. And you can see right here, there's a place for your menstrual cycle, to track your menstrual cycle. And I think it was really seeing that in there and kind of going through the, realizing that that part of my life has stopped and shifted, kind of soured me on using the journal, even though it just has this little bit right up here. You can see what it calls for, things, just to list 3 things I'm grateful for today, today's card pull, today's dasha, today's intention, I am, the highlight of today was, today I learned, I love myself, because this is a great little journal and something that would really, really benefit somebody who would want to get into journaling. But also, if you are really, really intent on working with the Yogic Path Oracle, it is a companion, and I think they would work so great in tandem, one with another. And that's why I'm going to let the journal go, because I think they really need to be worked with together. And I don't know at Half Price Books if they would put the journal and the deck together in their case. I may ask around to see if somebody might want the set. I don't know, but they're both leaving my collection for sure. And I don't know, maybe, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to rehome it, but they're both leaving. So I've decided that they're both going to be leaving my home, and that's okay. All right, next we have the Empath Oracle by Monica the Medium. And I believe this was the first Oracle deck I had backed on Kickstarter. And I had seen Monica the Medium on, was she on the Disney Channel? Whatever show. I had seen her before, so I was familiar with her, but this is very early on in discovering Oracle and Tarot. So I backed this deck on Kickstarter. It's a really, really pretty deck, a standard Oracle size, matte cardstock. It's gilded in that kind of metallic rose gold. I don't know if it's showing up as rose gold, but it is. And on the backs as well. Really nice. So I got this deck because I was curious about what Monica the Medium would have to offer. And I was wanting to develop a journaling practice, and I found that this deck worked as prompts. I was kind of in a, when I was starting to discover tarot, I was kind of like in a craving a self-help kind of pathway also, but I found that I outgrew this deck very, very quickly, and it has been sitting on my shelf for years. Used it, I would say solidly for a couple of months, and then I haven't used it since. I find that I don't need these type of decks to tell me what to do and what I need to do in certain more obvious things as these type of decks have. I think I need Oracle decks with more nuance and something a little bit more deep. So I did enjoy my time with this deck, and I think it's really pretty. The color palette is very soothing and calming, and this is kind of funny. Feel your feelings. I say it's funny, but you know what? it's needed, because sometimes in this era of, you know, we have to feel positive all the time, or something is wrong with us, and we don't, I think it's bad that sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel sad or angry or frustrated. You have to walk that line so that you don't let the negative feelings consume you, but you do have to let yourself feel them for a time so you can work through them. So yes, this kind of card is helpful, though, you know, sometimes it might seem a little cheesy. Again, with the find your people, you know, we know that we need to do that. It makes life quite pleasurable when you find your people. All right, but this deck is going to be rehomed, and I know somebody else will love it. Next, we have Tarot Cats by Bunny D. This is an indie deck that I found at Half Price Books, and I was so excited to find an indie deck at Half Price Books. I think this was the first indie deck that I found at Half Price Books, and you can see it is a totally cute deck. Look at that. Look at the illustrations. It's really, really cute. It's got super slippy, glossy cardstock, as you can probably see the shine. But I love the backs. I love the artwork. I love the illustrations. It's gold, etched in metallic gold. And you can see how pretty this deck is. But although I love cats, and there was a cat tarot deck in my other video, my other spring cleaning video, yeah, I read with it a few times. I'm much more of a dog person. I have one dog deck. It's my Dachshund deck, but I don't really read with it. I have that one mostly because it reminds me of my beloved Dachshund that I lost. I just have that purely for a collector's sentimental value. And I'm perfectly fine that, you know, I don't actually use that deck to read with. But I don't want to keep too many decks like that. And even though I really love the artwork and the illustrations, I find that this isn't like a sentimental or collector's deck for me. And it's not something I really would pick over something else to read with. So I think it would be a great find for a cat lover, don't you think? So on to somebody else's home it goes. All right, now we're going to be getting into an area where I'm not really sure if I'm going to rehome these decks, but I haven't been using them or felt called to use them. A couple of these pretty much since I got them, or not long after I got them. So I'm undecided on these next few decks. The first one is the Dark Wood Tarot by Sasha Graham and Abigail Larson. I love the illustrations on this deck. And see, I even edged mine in this nice gold or amber color to go along with the deck. But I find when I bought this deck, I thought that it would serve its purpose around Halloween. I find that I haven't really been called to use it during Halloween because I have other decks that I reach for. I do love the illustrations though, but I just haven't been called to use this deck. I did use it a bit when I first got it, but I don't know. I'm trying to decide. I think this could be one that I regret letting go, but maybe not. So maybe it needs to be set aside. I do have it prominent, you know, on my bookshelf in my living room. And I see it all the time, pass by it all the time, and I just don't reach for it. So yeah, you can put a comment below what you think I should do about this deck. Let me know your experiences with this deck. I've had some, you know, good readings. I haven't had any profound experiences with it. So I'm trying to decide because I'm unsure whether I should let this go. But like I said, it hasn't, I like it. I like it a lot. But, you know, and I don't really have any issues with it. But I just don't use it. I have a lot of other decks that fill this niche that I reach for. So yeah, I'm at a crossroads. Let me know what you think I should do about this deck. The Darkwood Tarot by Sasha Graham and Abigail Larson. Okay, the next one is also a gorgeous Llewellyn deck, and it is Barbara Moore's Wizard's Tarot. This deck is a great deck, and I was super excited when I filmed my unboxing of this deck. There are some cards in here that I really, really like. I do kind of like that Hierophant card. I used it for a bit when I got the deck. Haven't used it since. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm not super into this super fantasy world. If it's sort of a fairy tale world, but you know, the world of wizards, not totally my thing. I like fairy tales, and if I want a fantasy deck, I'm going to reach kind of for a mermaid deck. So this has been sitting on my shelf in the same place that the Darkwood Tarot has been. I don't dislike it. I love so many of these cards. This Three of Swords, I love. This Judgment card, I really, really love. But I'm wondering why I haven't reached for it. I think this is a great Nine of Swords too, and I really like this Five of Swords. This is a great deck. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I really need to work with this deck more. I remember enjoying it when I first got it, but I always reach for something else ahead of it. So I'm really going to have to re-examine my relationship with this deck and maybe just start using it. I think this one, even more than the Darkwood, I think I would miss this one. I'm going to have to sit with this. Let me know what your opinions are in the comment section below. All right, this one's a bit of a surprise for me. We have the Everyday Witch Tarot by Deborah Blake and Elizabeth Alba. This was an early purchase for me, early in my tarot journey. And it was about the time that this deck came out, and I kept hearing a lot about this deck. It was a favorite of so many YouTubers, so I got it. And I really enjoy working with this deck. I super, super enjoy working with this deck. It was fun. The book, I liked the way it was written. It made tarot easily accessible to me in understanding, you know, when I was a newbie. But I'm wondering, I'm kind of over the little witch hat and striped stockings. There's another deck that I don't have that's been calling me more, and it's the Green Witch Tarot. So if I wanted to call on this kind of energy in a reading, I think the Green Witch Tarot is maybe a little bit more of a mature aesthetic. I don't know. And I'm not talking about the people depicted. I'm just talking about the scenes. It's kind of hard to explain. But if I want to get that deck, I can't see keeping this one, because I'm very much more attracted to the Green Witch, and I'm feeling called to work with that one, even though I don't have it yet. So I don't want two witch decks that are kind of similar or kind of along the same vein. So if I do decide to get the Green Witch, I am going to let this one go, even though it's a fantastic deck. But again, I don't need these two type of decks in my collection. So stay tuned. We are down to the last deck. Thank goodness, right? We have the Everyday Witch Oracle. I will only rehome this deck if I rehome the Everyday Witch Tarot. I know a lot of people had problems with this deck when it came out. I happen to love it. And one of the reasons why I love this deck, and it's a nice big deck, I love the size of this deck because you can see Jessica Alba's beautiful artwork in this deck. And the other thing that I felt was missing in the Everyday Witch Tarot is a depiction of age and diverse body types. You get a little bit more of that here. And also of race, and I love that about this deck. And I quite like the writing in the book. I know this is not a favorite of many people, but I didn't have a problem with it. But I find that I only use this deck with the Everyday Witch Tarot. I maybe have tried pairing it with another deck once or twice, but I find that working with it with the Everyday Witch Tarot is just a winning combination for me. I've had a lot of great experiences working with this deck and the Everyday Witch Tarot. If I got the Green Witch Tarot, I don't know if this would pair as well with that deck. I would probably choose another Oracle deck. So this deck, I love it. I love the illustrations. This deck is only going if I rehome the Everyday Witch Tarot. And if I decide not to rehome that deck, this deck is staying. Let me know in the comments below what your experiences have been working with this deck. Do you love it? And I love this Earth Magic card. It's like yes, yes, yes to everything about this card. I love it. All right, that concludes my second deck rehoming video, spring cleaning video, whatever you'd like to call it. Again, every single one of these decks is beautiful and magical and has something to offer in its own way. And, you know, I've either outgrown them, didn't strike a bond that I wish I'd had for some of these decks, and that's okay. We're all different. We're all on our own path as far as the tarot and our oracle decks. And, you know, sometimes when we buy something, we can't always predict how it's going to suit our practice, how we're going to feel about it, how it's going to resonate. And that's just part of the process, and that's okay. And if we don't feel a certain way about a certain deck, the way everybody else seems to, that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with us. I'm okay. You're okay. And with that, I will leave you to get on with your beautiful day. Bye for now.